Okay, right. So this is a picture of 10 Sefirot. You don't have to necessarily follow that right now, but they're often put in threes. Some of them you may have heard of before, either because you've learned about them or you'll see why in a minute. So that's the whole lot. What are they? Where do they come from? So this is the original source. I don't know what the dating of this would be, but this is the source in the Zohar, which is the classic work of Kabbalah. In fact, we're coming up to Lag BaOmer, which is the Yortzeit of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who put together the Zohar. The Tikkun Zohar is, I believe, a commentary or additions to the Zohar. So this is what it says. Elijah opened his discourse, and this is what it says. Master of the world, you are one.
No, it might have gone.
Who's gone? Can you hear me?
Yeah, where's Selwyn? I can't see Selwyn.
Yeah, he's there. Here, yeah. Oh, hi, Selwyn.
Okay, so this is what Elijah said. Master of the world.
You are breaking up a bit, Rabbi, but that may be us.
Gosh, okay. I don't think there's much I can do about that, unfortunately. Okay. I'm really baffled why the davening was fine, and I'm actually on a more direct connection. So I don't understand this at all. But maybe all the kids are watching videos or something. Okay, I'll try. After practice next week, we'll go to shul. Okay, so Elijah opened his discourse, and this is what he said: Master of the world, you are one, but not in the numerical sense, right? It's not just one within one. You are exalted above all the exalted ones, hidden from all the hidden ones. No thought at all. I'm going to mute you. I hope you don't mind. It's very crackly. I'll bring you back on the screen. Okay, right. So, you are the one, you are he. Oh, sorry. Is that? Lost my page. You are he who has brought forth 10 garments, which we will call them 10 Sefirot, and revealed worlds. And through them you conceal yourself from man. Oh, that was the other thing we learned about, the 4 worlds. 4 worlds, 5 soul levels, 10 Sefirot. So, he says, you, God, have brought forth these 10 Sefirot. The saper is to count or to number or to tell over, to tell a story as a sipor. So, basically, these are 10 ways of conveying God's midot, his attributes. Right? Now, we know that we talk about, in the Seder, we talk about the hand of God, we talk about God in human terms, it's called anthropomorphism. Of course, we know in reality he has no human form, but nonetheless, this is how we understand him. So, if we were just told some mystical combination of Hebrew letters and numbers, it wouldn't help us. But by saying God is a man of war, or he is mighty, or he has an outstretched arm, or he embraces, it doesn't mean he literally does it, because he's not physical. But it gives us some point where we can relate to him. And the Torah does that all the time, constantly. So the Sefirot are basically 10 modes or attributes through which God is manifest. For example, chesed, kindness, or gevura, which means strictness and discipline and judgment. It's not God himself. It is the medium through which we basically ascribe things to him. Right? That might sound obvious, but we don't pray to the Sefirot. We pray to God. Interestingly, there is a very beautiful song, which some of you will know. I think we've sung it, Rabbi Fleischer sung it at the Selichos, Machnise Rachamim. Because Machnise Rachamim, Machnise Rachamim, which is basically saying, angels of mercy, bring our, please arouse mercy for us. Please bring our tears to the guardian of tears. Please basically intervene for us on high. So the interesting thing is that there is a little controversy around that, because why are we appealing to these angels? Why are we not appealing directly to God? So there's always some discussion about all these kind of things. So the Sefirot is not some intermediary. It's just a way of understanding in human terms God's presence and what he's doing in the world. Okay. Go back to the previous slide. So what are these 10 Sefirot? I'll give you the first 3 because they'll sound very familiar to you. And then I'll give you the next one to look at. Well, we'll talk about the first three of it first. So the first three, if you can see there, are Chochmah. Ignore the keter at the top for now. Chochmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Das, which is knowledge. If you put that together, you get Chabad, and that's where Chabad comes from. Chabad means intellectual rigor,
Bina
as opposed to the next ones,
and
which
Das.
are not as, there's a slightly clearer picture. And they're in a threesome for a reason. They're all linked together. Okay, and that shows how they connect the human body as well. We won't worry about that for now. So, you've got Chochmah, there's a bigger picture. Wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Das, which is knowledge. We're going to explore those for today, and then perhaps we'll move on to the next ones. There's a slightly clearer picture. You've got them in a sort of connected there. Chochmah's on the right, Bina on the left, and Das in the middle is a fusion of the two. Now, I've also got 3 letters of God's name here. You'll see why in a minute. So you probably did this right at the beginning of Rabbi Abrams, but we'll just quickly recap what these Sefirot are, because they all reflect. Forget for a moment the Chabad as a movement. Think of it as a Kabbalistic concept. So, how does intellectual inquiry work? And if somebody's going to ask me when these Sefirot were invented, I don't know. If they're in the Zohar, they're obviously very ancient. We know that it's interesting. It says that when Avram sent away Hagar, he sent them to the east with gift. And the Mefarshim, the commentaries say, those gifts were little sparks of spirituality. Now, where do you find a lot of mystical religions? In the East, interestingly, in the Far East. And, sort of, yes, like, what's his name? The Dalai Lama and things. It's all in the Far East. It's interesting that these concepts are very ancient, and I couldn't put an exact date on them. Did Moshe learn Kabbalah when he went up the mountain? Well, he certainly would have embraced these concepts. They may not have been expressed in quite the same way. Sometimes you have something that we know, we understand the concept, but we don't necessarily know the name of it or how it's manifested. So certainly they would have manifested and been written about in the times of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which is obviously in Talmudic times, and subsequent to that. So, what is Chochmah? Chochmah is, the initials, in Yiddish, people say, you're such a Chacham, you're such a wise guy, right? Sfardim call their chief rabbis Chacham. If anyone can't hear, by the way, just tell me in the chat.
You've gone silent.
Let's have, get the whole of Essex to, well, not now, but after Corona, let's get everyone to do Shabbos together, all 10,000 Jews in Essex, in one location. Great idea. Rabbi, how are you going to implement it? I don't know. I just come up with the idea. Someone else has to come up with the implementation, right? You have logistics people, you have ideas people. You sometimes have very creative people that are not very practical. Right? Someone has a great idea, but they don't know how to implement it. So Chochmah is the initial flash of brilliance. It's the initial idea when it hasn't yet been developed. Okay? That is like a yud. Yud happens to be the letters in God's name. Because a yud is a small and to the point. Right? It's not long droshes. It's not stretching. It is small and to the point. So Chochmah is initial idea. Let's do this. Let's do that. This would be great. I have a design for this, right? You can even get a patent sometimes on something without too much specific. Now, what's Bina? Lahavin is to understand in more depth. We use the word lahavin a few times. It's in the brachas before Shema. So a Bina means an understanding, a broadening, and a deepening of the understanding. Look at the hay. What does the hay do? It stretches out to the side and down. I can't remember the explanation for a little bit there. Right? So the hay is Bina of God's name. It's the stretching out, the broadening, and the widening and the deepening of the concept. So Chochmah is, I have a great idea. We need to go online and start doing online services and shiurim and programs. Bina would be, I'm going to go and do some research. How are we going to do it? How many computers do we need? What kind of internet do we need? What programs do we need? How are we going to schedule it? How are we going to advertise it? That's the Bina. If it's a concept, somebody say, I have a great idea. God is one. Right? You tell a child, Hashem is one. Hashem is where Hashem is there, whatever. He's in every direction. The Bina would be explaining that in more detail. How does that work? He's infinite. That's what we learn a lot in things like Tanya. And finally, you have Das. Now, Yodea in Hebrew means to know, knowledge, okay? Everyone here over 18? Yes. So in Hebrew, the way you describe an intimate relationship is das. It says Adam yada es chava ishto. He knew his wife, right? To know someone in the biblical sense. Why? Because the deepest knowledge you can possibly have of someone is intimate knowledge. You can't get more up close and personal than that. And deep connection. So in non-intimate terms, das is the deep connection and depth goes into something, right? And it's particularly relevant to Torah. So you might say, oh, I'm interested in, I don't know, the big, whatever, the chaos theory. So I'll go study it. It's really interesting and this and that. But it doesn't necessarily touch me on the deepest level and connects me in an almost intimate way. Das is that intimate connection, right? People who go to Israel who only speak biblical Hebrew often embarrass themselves, because if you want to say, I know somebody in modern Hebrew, you don't say, Ani Yodea, you say, Ani Makir. Ani Makir means to recognize someone. Ani Yodea, to anyone who speaks biblical Hebrew, would imply carnal knowledge. So it's not something you would actually say. But Das is the deepest possible connection and knowledge, and that's the Vav. It stretches all the way down to the deepest level. Okay? So those are the first 3 Sefirot in the 10 Sefirot. They deal with our wisdom and how we understand things. So Chochmah is a concept in its initial sort of infancy. Bina is the broadening and the deepening of that concept. And Das is the internalizing of that and the deepest connection, which is something particularly unique to Torah. And they happen to correspond to the first 3 letters of God's name. I did this late last night from memory, so I can't remember what happens to the last A of God's name, but it does come in there somewhere as well. Okay? You've got Chochmah on the right, Bin on the left, and Das is sort of in the middle. It's a fusion of the two, right? To have a deep connection to something, it's not enough to say, I have a great idea. And someone says, oh, wow, that idea really speaks to me. That's really deep. I feel it in my bones, right? On the other hand, to deeply feel and connect something, you don't have to have the complete breadth and depth either, right? And you can have someone who has a breadth and depth of knowledge who doesn't actually connect to their audience or to the person they're trying to convey it to, right? And the best teachers are not always the best distributors of wisdom. There was a wonderful rabbi in Liverpool many years ago. I won't mention his name just because, nothing bad. But he was the rabbi in King David Primary School. He had an amazing way of connecting with his students. People would come around to his house, with his family, like on Shabbos. So these kids that were not interested in anything, but they come like on Egg Shabbos, and they come, the teenagers would come, and so on and so forth. And he made a great connection, and he had an impact on many people's lives. Apparently, he didn't teach very well. So they didn't get that much knowledge in terms of book knowledge, but they got that experience. I had a teacher in high school like that as well, a Jewish studies teacher, one of the rabbis. Everyone loved him, told the most wonderful stories. He inspired people. Probably a large number of people are more engaged in Judaism, possibly even more from today because of him. But in terms of those who are doing A-level Judaism, said it's terrible. He doesn't cover the syllabus. We're not learning anything. Right? Obviously, if you have to teach a course, you should teach the course. But the point is, intimate connection with knowledge, with concepts, is not the same as acquiring book knowledge. And Das is sort of something more intimate, more spiritual than just having lots of facts and figures at your fingertips. There is a rabbi, some of you may have come across, Rabbi Lowenthal, who's also a professor at UCL of, I think, Jewish philosophy and mysticism. Very nice man, lovely, wonderful teacher. So they used to say there was a certain lady, I don't remember her name, but she was a professor of Talmud somewhere, I think, also at London University. And they said if you walk into her house, she's got the same number of books on her shelves as Rabbi Lowenthal. The difference is there's no mezuzah. I think she's Jewish, right? So in other words, for her, it's just an academic subject. It's not something that is deep and personal. Whereas for those of us that study Torah and it's personal to us and we internalize it, it's a different type of a study. And Tanya speaks about this a lot, how Torah connects to us on the deepest level. But in terms of the Sefirot, this is how, so 3 out of 10 Sefirot deal with intellectual understanding, because ultimately a large part of connecting to Hashem is understanding Torah, understanding Torah concepts. Okay, everyone's being very quiet, which is fine. I hope everyone can hear me. Any questions? Hello? Everyone okay? Does this make sense?
Yeah, all good so far. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So, so that's the first week Sefirot. Now, the next 7, which we haven't talked so small, but we'll just talk about them as a cliffhanger, are the emotional ones. So if you look at the next 7, you can't see them on the screen. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 4 is Chesed. 5 is Gevurah. 6 is Tiferet. Now, Chesed means kindness. Right? There's a time and place for kindness. Gevurah means discipline and judgment and severity. Right? There's a time when you have to crack down on things. Right? You can have misplaced.
You're breaking up quite a lot, Rabbi.
Oh, okay. I'm about to finish. You can have misplaced kindness, for example. Right? The classic story about the guy that sees the moth trying to break out, the caterpillar trying to break out in the chrysalis and wants to release it. Meanwhile, it's not fully developed. Butterfly that's basically permanent scar, right? And sometimes you need discipline as well. Gevurah is boundary and discipline, strength.
Yeah.
And Tiferet is beauty, but it's also harmony between the two. So with parenting, for example, if you're too much sensitive, if you're too soft, and you always say yes, it doesn't work. But by the same token, 1 second, okay? Oh, 1 second.
Didn't hear you.
Okay, is that better? I've muted everyone. So if you're always kind and you always say yes to everyone, you get yourself into a mess. If you're always strict and say no to everyone, it's also not good. So Tiferet is about finding the harmony. Those are the first 3. So when you look at your counting the Omer, and even the Singers has it, although it doesn't give you the actual Sefirah, it talks about these ones. Chesed is number 1. The first week was the week of Chesed, kindness. Gevurah is number 2, severity and strictness. And Tiferet, harmony, is number 3. As the audio seems to be going, I think we'll try to pause there. So that's where the first 3 Sefirot are the intellectual concepts, if you like, how knowledge works in Torah terms. It's not just a flash of brilliance. It's not just having a lot of facts and figures and deeper knowledge at your fingertips, but it's also about that deep connection, right? And that's why when we learn Torah, it says normally, the Rambam talks about it in his early principles. He says normally, if I read a speech by Winston Churchill, if I read enough speeches, Churchill will become my hero. I'll be inspired by Churchill to a point. And I'll get to know him. And if I read enough speeches, eventually, I'll feel like I really know him. But it's not quite the same as a deep connection to Winston Churchill. He's not alive, right? Hasidim nowadays, Lubavitch Hasidim, after the Rebbe passed away, they learn the Rebbe's teachings. They feel it connects them, right? And it does on a deep level. But it's not quite the same as meeting that person. When we learn Torah, it's different. Because when we learn Torah, it's directly connected to Hashem and to his infinite wisdom. So it's not just like opening a book and studying something and acquiring knowledge. It is making that deep, intimate connection to Hashem. That's why 30% of the mystical Sefirot deal with how knowledge is acquired and the filters through which we understand things, because we are the people of the book, and study and knowledge is so important. So I'm going to pause there for this week. Next week, we'll start to look at the other Sefirot. We'll do a similar diagram to this, which is a bit clearer. I'm sorry for